Oh, that's a beautiful jab cross. Followed up by the hook there. Lots of power. Very technical. Very technical. Great work. Oh, there's another 1-2 by Wilder. Great job. Great selection. Great 1-2 back by Fury. Okay. Okay. Well, are they copying each other? Another jab cross by Wilder. Hmm. Jab cross back by Fury. What is with this? Jab cross by Wilder. Is this the only punch that these guys know? Like, what is happening here? Okay, well, maybe that's just these guys. Let's try a couple of different other fights here. Okay, well, is it just these guys? Is this just like the modern meta of fighting? Maybe we should try a couple of classic fights, see how people used to do it throughout history. Like, surely it had to look different back then, right? Okay, well, never mind. Those are the exact same punches in the exact same order. Maybe it's different in an MMA fight. Let's check that out.
Foggy, he it is cut. Chung is in the head.
He's open. You see his mouth open like that?
Oh, big left.
Oh, he got nailed. That's why.
First of 5 scheduled rounds, reaching the midway point.
Again on the
big
button.
left, and down goes Quarry.
Okay. Now, why would all of these same punches show up in consistently the same order across all these different eras and even across sports? If you're not a hardcore fight fan, you might not have even noticed this, and a casual observer, you could kind of be forgiven for thinking this doesn't look that much different from the sort of random flailing you see in a street fight video. Even if you are a hardcore fight fan, you could be forgiven for just sort of accepting that fighters all use such similar patterning because that's just what works. But if you're someone like me, who spent most of their life following or participating in the MMA and fight community at large, and your brain never stops asking why, then you too may be driven to understand the meta of strike selection. So what we're going to go over and try to understand in this series, actually, because it's such a broad topic and ends up needing to be broken down into so many different smaller components to be able to understand how we actually arrived at the current meta. We're going to try to understand, where did these punches come from? Who popularized what techniques? What was the meta across the ages, on an era by era basis? And then we're going to look at, why are the combos taught the way they are, and why are they in the order that they're in? Like, why do they work if everyone knows the same combos? The sport that we would come to recognize as boxing today started in 1743 by ring legend Jack Broughton, when he codified a set of rules for the exhibitions that he put on his amphitheater. Broughton's rules included such sissifications as no hitting the opponent while he's down, clarifications for what constituted a beaten man, and that while the fight was happening, only the fighters, their seconds, and the man reffing were to be on the stage. That's right, not a ring, which wouldn't exist until the London prize ring rules were drafted in 1838, but a stage. See, apparently before 1743, pretty much any arranged dispute took place as some overly caffeinated Just Bleed fans' dream combination of early UFC and the Diaz Strikeforce brawl.
Oh, God!
Wow. Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
The rules, if any, were agreed to more or less on the spot, loosely enforced, if not outright discarded immediately, and with no established parameters separating the fighters from the crowd of spectators who were invariably present because of the wagers that they had placed. These bouts were near as likely to end by being broken up by the police or a near riot as they were by the actual conclusion of the bout itself. Broughton also normalized his pupils' training with mufflers, hitting UFC 6 Tank Abbott levels of awareness when it came to basic hand protection. Yeah, I know, Melton Bowen did it first at UFC 4, but nobody remembers that. And even though this obviously nerfed the real fighting man's ability and banned everyone's favorite technique of tripping the opponent and dive bombing on top of them in the fashion of Mark Hunter, Dan Henderson, the rules were widely adopted and paved the way for a more scientific fighter compared to the brawling sluggers that dominated the time period. And now we finally arrive in our story at a place where we can discuss technique, because we've finally gotten to the part of boxing history where the grandfather of the sweet science comes into the picture, Daniel Mendoza. Now, Daniel was the lightest heavyweight of all time. He was only 160 pounds. He stood 5'7", and because of this size discrepancy he had against most of his opponents, he had to devise a couple new tactics as means to avoid being injured by a larger man. What were these tactics, you ask? They were hitting with a straight left and sometimes stepping off to his side. The fight meta in Mendoza's time was a casual fan's paradise, a drunken tough men trading right hands in a fashion that would put Fry versus Takayama to shame.
They're cooking it up, not right with right hand. Takayama. Boom. Look at this. Synchronized punching. Synchronized punching. Both guys wailing away with right hands. Takayama looking really bad here. Fry blasting the right and the left now.
For daring to occasionally avoid a punch and having the audacity to punch out with his left hand, Mendoza was the first boxer in history to receive the Mayweather honor of being accused of retreating and running away. Still, the idea that you could box without relying entirely on your HP bar and raw power output caught on amongst the masses, and Mendoza quickly found himself holding exhibitions and lessons on his methods to crowded theaters multiple times a week. Now, there is a reason why I called Mendoza the grandfather of the sweet science and not the father, like most people do and like he's written down in most of the history books, and that's because I don't think he really made fighting that much more technical. To see what I mean, let's look at the first example of boxing footage we have, which is Mike Leonard versus Jack Cushing. This is an exhibition, and it was filmed in August of 1894. This is almost 100 years after Mendoza retired, and almost 60 years after he died. So after 60 plus years of development, we have this. This is some of the crudest and most awkward swinging. Like, you would see this in day one on any gym on the planet. Yeah, again, if this is what scientific fighting looks like, 100 years after Mendoza's career is done, like, just imagine how crude and barbaric the matches were that happened during or before Mendoza's time. So, in this sequence, we don't see a single jab. We see some pretty awkward hooks. We see exactly one uppercut. And like all the footwork here is completely linear, just going straight forward and back. The other guy is not moving at all, except for here, where he does one little slip and a pivot. And then they just each go back to trading exactly one punch per sequence. It's like, it seems to be the gentleman's agreement that they have. And no head movement whatsoever.
Head movement!
Both guys just kind of duck down. You just accept that there's going to be a punch each exchange. And I know what you're thinking. You're going harm bars, but this was just an exhibition, and neither of them even really had any kind of records to write home about. And don't worry, because our next fight was filmed in the exact same year, and I'm going to show you it doesn't actually look any better. So here we have Gentleman Jim Corbet versus Courtney. And Gentleman Jim is not just anybody. He's not some random slugger. He's actually the highest example of boxing at this time period. But even still, compared to today's standards, it's very crude. His head is straight up in the air. He throws good punches and a good variety of punches, but he keeps looking away completely from his opponent. He stands completely upright, and he likes to lean straight backwards. Like, he's a ring legend in his own time, but any gifted amateur, even half his size, would definitely knock him flat today. Now, to be completely fair to Jim, given what he had available to work with as far as material and knowledge and available materials that he could study, he was actually doing pretty good, pretty freaking amazing. But this next generation that we're about to go into, like, we're going to go forward a few years now and look at Jack Dempsey, and just being able to watch clips of people doing boxing, you're going to see a giant jump in the skill level that's going on here. And even at this point, I'm not going to give Jack Dempsey the title of father of modern boxing because, again, he kind of did a few things. He didn't really have the whole package together as a complete fighter. And so here we're looking at Dempsey versus Willard. That's Dempsey in the white shorts there, and this was the first fight to have $1 million gate. So that tells you, I mean, what an insane level that boxing had reached at this point, going from pretty much illegal everywhere, and it was still kind of a gray area here in the 20s, to being able to actually make $1 million plus. It was actually 1.6 million in 1920s money, you know, a real 1.6 million. And so here we have kind of a clash of the old school with Willard versus the newer school of boxers coming in with Dempsey. So Willard actually has a decent jab. He's got his hands low, but he's a really big man, and you know, big men can get away with that. He actually wants to keep it tight here. But with Dempsey, we can see the beginnings of a Philly shell stance. We can see his footwork. He actually has lateral movement. He's coming in and out. You never really know, is he about to jump in and attack? Is he gonna slide on off to the side? He looks kind of like a vintage Arturo Gatti, really. But what really made Jack Dempsey fun, he didn't create the left hook, but he might as well have, because he made it his signature punch, really, especially with a littler man. Here we see in the sequence, right, left, boom, down goes Willard. Yeah, that was really Dempsey's signature punch, was his left hook. You'll see again here, every punch he actually hurts Willard with is his left hand. You see an interesting quirk in the rules here, because even here in the 1920s, you were allowed to just basically stand over your man until he got to his feet. Like, no neutral corner. Ref's not going to tell you to go anywhere. He might try to kind of stand in between you. And as soon as that man is on his feet, you are allowed to pop him. But the skill level gap, even in just, I think this is like a 10, it might be 20 years since the Corbet fight. The tremendous skill level gap here by Dempsey. Like, his ability to move, there's not a whole lot of real head movement here, but look at this. The gone is the days of one punch per exchange. Dempsey will just maul you. And that's definitely, he was known as the Manasseh Mauler. Whereas most guys come in, one big shot, they slug away. They didn't have the cardio or the timing or the balance to be able to do multiple shots the way that Dempsey could. And wow, just showing how broad of a subject this really is. I've already run out of room on this video to keep talking, and I had to cut out a bunch of stuff. I had to gloss over how Sam Elias is credited with inventing the uppercut. Jack Johnson's the one who made it famous. I even had to gloss over how James Corbet is credited as having invented the left hook because he broke his thumb in a fight and had to alter how he was throwing his hands. I still think Dempsey should get more credit for it because Dempsey throws it the way a modern boxer does, where it's tight and short. He doesn't have his head way up in the air, and he isn't just swinging his torso around. It's tight. It's a full body movement when he throws it. But I'm going to have to get into more of that in the next video, and we're finally going to get into a few of my personal favorite fighters, like Joe Louis and Archie Moore. We have a lot more to cover, so please hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and don't be afraid to say hello in the comments.